I kind of give people a few minutes just in case there's like a clock discrepancy or something. Here we are in week 11, getting closer and closer to the holiday breaks. We were talking a few minutes ago about that. If you go to this week in the classwork section, you'll see I have this week's instructions. So let me start with the updates. Just a reminder that this is an A week, so that means you'll have 3 formatives, and I hope that the reminders have been helpful to you in Google Classroom. I delete them like the next week because they're just there to help you remember to do them that day, so they show up in that grid when you have all your classes there. You don't have to actually turn anything in on most of my stuff. It's just reminders to get something done. Also, this is the beginning of the third 6 weeks, so report cards just got uploaded a little while ago, and all that stuff is done. The third 6 weeks is short, by the way. We have this week and next week. Then we have the week off for Thanksgiving. When we get back, it's already the first week of December. And there's 3 weeks, not quite 3 weeks before Christmas break, but I feel like that last week is going to be exams, and you guys finish on Thursday the 17th. We have a work day on the 18th, but I feel like that week of the 14th is going to be exams. I don't know how they're going to do that virtually. I don't know. We'll figure it out in December, I guess. But yeah, so there's only really 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks plus the exam week in the third 6 weeks. So, you know, just stay on top of your stuff in your classes and make sure that if there's any discrepancies or anything else pops up, that you take care of it sooner rather than later, because there's less time to work through things this 6 weeks. FYI, it's your semester grade that goes on your transcript, just in case you didn't know that. So you can be looking right now at your grades in the first and second 6 weeks in your classes and trying to figure out what you might need to make on the semester exam in the third 6 weeks to get the grade that you want, right? If in your class you want to make sure that you have an A, then you need to look at the first and the second 6 weeks, average those out, and see what you need to make in the other 2 to maintain that, right? So you can spend some time in all your free time doing that if you wanted to. Hybrid schedule. The schedule this week is the same as last week. They were saying that there was going to be a new schedule next week because we have full hybrid starting next week, meaning that any student who wants to come to hybrid is just 2 days a week, by the way. Half the alphabet comes on Monday, Tuesday, and then the other half comes on Wednesday, Thursday. But anybody who wants to do hybrid and chose that, you have to have chosen that in the last survey, then you'll be eligible to come to campus. And so they were saying they were going to change the schedule, but I haven't seen it yet. So if they put that out later in the week, I will definitely send it to you here on Google Classroom. We already said 10 school days until Thanksgiving break, so that's good. We're going to finish up with Metamorphosis before the break, and then we'll be doing a little bit of work afterwards, and then preparing for the exam. So okay, assignments. Let me go over the assignments, and then we have some things that we will do in the lesson. I did grade the progress checks and stuff, so we'll go over that. The assignments this week, we're going to have a discussion today on Metamorphosis chapters 1 through 2. You should have read chapter 2 for today. Hopefully you did, because I have an idea for a Padlet discussion that we're going to do together. There is a vocabulary list. Okay, so there's a vocabulary list for chapter 3, which is the last chapter of the Metamorphosis, but I do not have a quiz this week. I know you're going to be super sad that I don't have a quiz for you this week. It's because I want you to watch some videos and take some notes instead. So in my mind, I kind of feel like there's a level where it's too much in a week. Does that make sense? So if I want to add something, I have to take something out. and like postpone it or just, get rid of it. But I don't want to add another thing. I want to just sort of like keep it on around four things to do in a week. So hopefully you don't feel cheated that you don't have a quiz this week. We'll have one next week. I just didn't feel like it was necessary to do one this week. If you feel left out, if it makes you super sad, just email me and I'll write a quiz for you. If anybody's feeling lonely about it. But I do want you to do the vocabulary words on vocabulary.com, because that's going to prepare you for reading chapter 3. Right? The vocabulary helps you a little bit with that. The third assignment is there are some notes to do. Obviously, you've noticed that this is not a normal story. This is kind of a weirdo. And there are some reasons why. And it's a classic work of literature, but it is a little strange compared to other things that you might have read. So there's a couple of videos that I want you to watch. If you go down here, you can see I made each one into a separate assignment down here so that you can check them off of your to-do list. But there are 3 videos to watch. They're all pretty short. I try not to pick too long of videos. And these are going to give you some more information about metamorphosis and its sort of literary qualities that make it unique. There are 3 videos. So when you are doing your notes, I put a little list right here of what you should be getting out of those videos. So by the time you watch these 16 minutes worth of videos total, you should be able to understand how Franz Kafka's dysfunctional relationship with his father worked, what the term Kafkaesque means, and what an allegory is. And if you think about those things and relate them to what we're reading here in the Metamorphosis, then I think you'll be in a good position for next week when we finish off the novella with chapter 3. So the idea with the videos is to learn about these 3 things, and then in your mind think, okay, how is this overlapping with what I'm getting from the Metamorphosis? It's okay when we read challenging literature. I mean, it's not challenging too much with vocabulary, but conceptually it's a challenging piece of literature. It's okay to kind of be confused and working things out in your mind while you're reading it. If something that you're reading in class is too simple, there's probably something you're missing, because everything that we read has a complexity to it, right? But if it's so complex that it's kind of like bothering you because you're kind of like working it out, and every time you read it, it's a little frustrating because you feel like there's something that's beyond your reach with it. That's normal when you're reading literature, right? So that wrestling is part of your growth as a reader and a writer and a thinker. So it's important to do that. So it's okay to come to class with questions, and we're going to work with those questions today. It's not okay to like finish something and move on and still have questions. So it's my job to help us sort those things out in due time as we read the piece and sort of like untangle the web and give you assignments that will help you to do that. And that's what I'm doing all the time. So these videos are going to give you a little bit of insight into the author's life, his relationship with his father specifically, and some of the terminology that's kind of valuable when we're talking about the Metamorphosis and what Kafka's trying to do with this piece. So it's okay if it's a little weird. And, I think in section 2, we start having new opinions about Gregor's family, right? But it's still a little bit confusing. And even when it's over, it'll still be confusing, but we'll have some activities where we work through things at the end. So where was I? I was going through the assignments. And then the last thing is, after the videos, is to read chapter 3. So as you're reading chapter 3, you can be thinking about Kafkaesque and allegory, and try to sort of meld those with what's going on in the text. So any questions on those assignments? No? Everybody's okay with not having a quiz? Nobody said anything, so I'm assuming you're okay. Or put anything in the chat. All right. Then for the lesson today, I have two things that I want to do. The first one is I want to talk a little bit about Progress Check 2. So why don't you go, if you're on your computer, go to AP Classroom and log in so that you can see your scores on the most recent progress check. That one got delayed because of that outage that they had. I don't know if it was an outage or like a planned maintenance, but I remember that we had it due on a Sunday and it was out all week or something like that. So we delayed it, and now my grades are done in there though. So I've scored them all. And I want to talk about those two poems a little bit today. And it'd be good if you had your response on the screen so that while I talk about what I saw in the responses and how that's going, for the most part, people did pretty well. At this stage in the AP practice, they don't have you writing full-length things. They have you reading something and writing a paragraph or so. Later on, you know, like after Thanksgiving, before Christmas, or for your exam, we'll start working on longer essays, you know, in timed situations. So for sure, second semester, we'll be transitioning from writing paragraphs to writing, you know, 4 or 5 paragraph responses. And I'll show you how to do that. But if you go to the AP Classroom, I do want to talk about these two poems. I thought I put the link on here for the, well, I'll just go through the present mode, I guess. I do think it's good to debrief after we do a practice like that. I know that the score that you get in AP Classroom is just for your information. It's kind of like, at this stage, are you thinking and writing the way that you should about poetry, short fiction, whatever the little unit is that we're doing? And so the scores in AP Classroom don't count in the grade book. The only grade I put in there is just, did you do it? Because, you know, I think that it's worth your time, but we're not allowed to give grades on that stuff. The College Board forbids it. So it's all about seeing your own growth over time and what you're improving on. So I think it's worth it to talk about the progress checks after we've done them and kind of debrief a little bit. I want to point out to you, I know I've talked about this in the past, but I just want to remind you that right now, they're giving you 3 points possible for each question. So that's 6 points total. The way that you get points is with the claim and then with the reasoning to support the claim. And so the claim itself is 1 point. And then the hold on, I have to check this first. The way that you prove that claim with elements from the passage and your own commentary is up to 2 points. Now, on the actual AP exam, it's a 6-point scale. So you can see that there's going to be an expansion of the way that we're scoring this later on. Now, I score for the AP. I go to Salt Lake City every year, well, not this last year, and I sit in a room with 1,000 other educators and we score the actual AP exam. This past year we did it online because everything was online. So right now we're kind of doing the early, easier version of the AP essay, and we're going to have to start phasing in the expectations for the 6-point scale. I just want to let you know about that. So some people lose a point because they have a claim, or you can think of a claim as a thesis, but the support kind of is all over the place, and it doesn't, the things that are said in the paragraph don't all go back to the claim. Sometimes people just start noticing things and start writing about them without realizing that they don't really go with the claim that was presented in the paragraph. So some people end up with 2 points instead of 3 for that reason. Just a reminder of how those points work out there. So let me also remind you about those passages, because we had to take a little extra time with it because of the shutdown on the site. But the first one was a poem called Double Dutch, right? Wasn't it called Double Dutch? And it's about Double Dutch. It says, in the following poem by Gregory Pardlow, the speaker describes watching children playing double dutch, a version of jumping rope in which two ropes are turned in opposite directions. So they're adding, that's information section. Maybe there's some people who have never seen that kind of jump rope, where they are twirling in both ways and they have to like double jump in the middle. Maybe somebody's never seen that, so they have a little background just in case you don't know what that is. It could be hard to read the poem if you don't know what that is. Then it says, here's the job, right? I highlighted the actual task because that was one of the key tools that I showed you last time. Figure out what the job is that they're asking you to do and focus in on that. I'm going to show you a new strategy today. Read the poem carefully, of course. Write a paragraph in which you make a defensible claim regarding how Pardlow uses simile and metaphor to convey a complex image of the girls. In your paragraph, you should incorporate at least one piece of evidence from the text to support your claim. So that means they want you to find something specific in the poem to support your thesis or your claim that you're presenting. So that's what they already had on the page there. And if you're in the the AP classroom, then you can see that there. So here's the poem. I'm going to read it to you because it's been a little while. My little picture's in the way over. I'll just make it small. Double Dutch by Gregory Pardlow. The girls turning double Dutch bob and weave like boxers pulling punches, shadowing each other, sparring across the slack cord, casting parabolas in the air. They whip quick as an infant's pulse, and the jumper, before she enters the winking, nods in time as if she has a notion to share, waiting her chance to speak. But she's anticipating the upbeat like a band leader counting off the tune they are about to swing into. The jumper stair steps into midair as if she's jumping rope in low gravity, training for a lunar mission. Airborne a moment long enough to fit a second thought in, she looks caught in the mouth bones of a fish as she flutter floats into motion like a figure in a stack of time-lapse photos thumbed alive. Once inside, the bells tied to her shoestrings rouse the gods who've lain in the dust since the Dutch acquired Manhattan. How she dances patterns like a dust-heavy bee, retracing its travels in scale before the hive. How the whole stunning contraption of girl and rope slaps and scoops like a paddle boat. Her misted skin arranges the light with each adjustment and flex. Now heather-hued, now sheen. Light listing on the fulcrum of a wrist and the bare jutted joints of elbow and knee and the faceted surfaces of muscle, surfaces fracturing and reforming like a sun-tickled sleeve of running water. She makes jewelry of herself and garlands the ground with shadows. All right, so the question is asking, right? Like, so what is, I meant to go back the other way. How is the poet using simile and metaphor to show us what's happening in the action with these girls, to characterize the girls and their actions, basically? So the strategy that I want to show you today is I highlighted, I'm assuming that you can tell that I highlighted a lot of the similes and things in this passage. So here's the strategy that I want to show you today, and it has to do with making a question. Many of you are doing a very good job with your claims. Some of you are doing a satisfactory job, and it could be better. You'll know because I put comments on all of your responses from Progress Check 2. But one thing that you can do to make certain that you have a really tight response and that you aren't kind of like all over the place, I can tell most of the time when somebody just starts answering the question and then they put down whatever comes to mind, because by the end of the paragraph, they're in a different place than they were at the beginning of the paragraph, because they stopped and they went, what could I say next? And they just typed in the next thought, and it gradually gets farther and farther away from what the topic was that we were supposed to be writing about. So we don't want that to happen. So one thing that you can do to guard against that is to make sure that you have a really solid thesis or claim before you start writing the paragraph, right? And in the time situation, you can get a piece of paper and kind of like, work it out a little bit on the side. But the way that you can do it is to turn the task part of the prompt into a question, right? So this is the task part. I just moved it over from the prompt. Write a paragraph in which you make a defensible claim regarding how Pardlow uses simile and metaphor to convey a complex image of the girls. I had some responses where people just wrote about imagery and they never even mentioned simile and metaphor. Well, that can't be a passing score because they're telling you they want you to write about how simile and metaphor create that complex image. So you have to craft a question that you can answer that includes all the things that they're looking for. I can take this task and turn it into a question like this. What is the complex image of the girls that is created by the metaphors and similes in the poem? When I can answer that question, that's the first sentence of my response. That's my claim. Because once I can name what that complex image is doing, because the metaphors and similes, then I can support that. All right, I'm going to show you the same technique on the second poem too, so we'll be able to practice it a couple times. So here is the question that I crafted from that task. I hope you all are following me because I have your little video thing off. It says, what is the complex image of the girls that is created by the metaphors and similes in the poem? Now, there are lots of ways you can answer that. Does that mean that there are no wrong answers? No. If I said that the girls are portrayed as violent predators, that does not come through in the poem, and that is a misreading of the poem. Or if I let outside factors influence my understanding of the poem, and I said, well, you can tell that the girls are poor and they are, seeking opportunities for themselves. They're just jumping rope. I can't put outside things onto the poem itself. So I want to stay with this question, right? What is the complex image of the girls that is created by metaphors and similes? There are lots of ways to answer that, and here are 3 different ones. The poet uses metaphor and simile to suggest that the girls playing double dutch are quick, strong adventurers who are experts in their craft. That's one answer. All of that is true from the poem. You could go back and pull out specific details. You go back and find the similes and the metaphors that help to create that idea. I wouldn't want to pull out a simile or a metaphor that didn't support quick, strong, or expert. I wouldn't pick any of those. I would only pick the ones that are doing that. Or I'd go back and change my claim and make it match. So whatever ones I end up putting in the paragraph are the ones that I mentioned in my claim. So this can be your very first or second sentence in your paragraph, but it has to be really clearly stated, and then you have to stick to it. They call that a line of reasoning. And that's where papers sometimes lose points at the AP reading because people kind of wander around and they get off topic a little bit and then they come back because they're sitting there going, oh, what should I put next? Instead of focusing on the claim. Here's another good response. The comparisons in the poem create the double dutch girls as almost magical in their command of the skill. Can I go back and find metaphors and similes, comparisons, that make it seem like what they're doing is magical? Sure. They're compared to lots of elements of nature and mystical things like that. So I could go back and make that point. But I wouldn't want to talk about how they're quick or strong because that's not part of that particular claim. I would only want to talk about the ones that I've decided I'm going to write about, right? The third one, the metaphors and similes in the poem help us understand that the girls are powerful and graceful, masterful, and natural. Well, that's 4 things I would have to prove then in my paragraph or my essay. So the more things you add, the more complex your response gets. They do usually say complexity, right? Usually in the question, there's an element of the complex. Well, is it complex to say that they're strong? It's not wrong, but it's not complex. It's not deep or challenging. But 4 different things. I've got to prove powerful, graceful, masterful, and natural. Those are all different. So I'm going to have to pull from the poem 4 different places that help support that claim. And that is a more complex thing to look at. It's more complex to say that the girls have these 4 qualities than to say that they have 1 quality. So if your issue is that you need to up the complexity, maybe think about more description words, right? So there's a couple of different strategies, the question strategy, and also how to make something more complex. More complex with support equals more points. Because anybody will notice that they're strong, right? Hopefully that makes sense. Any questions on that one? Just a reminder that they always include this on these progress checks. It's very similar to the directions that are on the AP exam. Make sure that you respond with a prompt with a claim that presents an interpretation, meaning you're not just repeating the prompt, you have to interpret an answer. We're just looking at some of those with the answers to those questions. Select and use evidence to develop and support your interpretation. Evidence means same thing as it does on STAR or anything else. It means go back and find something in the text that helps you support that claim or that thesis that you presented. Well, if you don't present a thesis, what are you supporting? So the essays or the paragraphs that don't start with a claim as kind of like the forefront of the response kind of sometimes fall apart because the things in the paragraph don't know what to refer to. Hopefully that makes sense. The third thing is explain the relationship between the evidence and your interpretation. So you can't just throw evidence up there, you have to connect it to what you're trying to say about the piece of literature, and of course, grammar and punctuation. All right, anything about passage 1 before I move on and talk a little bit about the second poem that you had on that? Speak now or forever hold your peace.
No, miss, I'm good.
Okay. All right, so topic 2 was a different poem, maybe a little more serious. And the prompt looks like this. In the following poem by Meili Vang, or Vong, I don't know, the speaker describes her family. Read the poem carefully, write a paragraph in which you make a defensible claim regarding how Vang uses contrast to convey the complex relationships among the members of the speaker's family. That's the task. In your paragraph, you should incorporate at least 1 piece of evidence from the text to support your claim. Okay, so take a second and think about, you already answered this, so you already worked with it. Think about this task. How Vang uses contrasts to convey the complex relationships among the members of the speaker's family. How could you turn that into a question, like we did with the first passage? What would be the easy thing to do, probably? I could just put does right here, right? How does Vang use contrast to convey the complex relationship among the members of the speaker's family? And then when I answer that, then that's my claim. There are other ways that you could rearrange that into a question, but there's something magical about when you ask a question, your answer has to answer that question. And so your claim then is tied clearly to the task. So it's a little trick by asking yourself the question. Here's the one I put. How do contrasts help us understand the complex relationships between the members of the speaker's family? Now, what are they talking about when they mean contrasts?
Like comparing? Like how
Well,
different?
right, comparing is making similarities, but contrasting is the opposite, right? That's like always when you're writing an essay, it's compare contrast, right? So contrast is how are they different? Night and day are, diametrically contrasting each other, tall and short. So if I know before I even read the poem that I'm looking for contrasts, I might keep them in mind as I'm reading the poem for the first and second time. And just because I'm not writing about anything else except contrasts and the relationship among the family members. So anything else that I see is not really related to my answer to the question. Somebody has to mute their thing. So I might see a really beautiful metaphor or some really great imagery or something like that, but I'm not writing about it because they're not asking me to write about that unless it's part of a contrast, right? Okay, so here's the poem. It's Relations by Mei Li Wang. Father left when I was 5. He dwells among the dead in a land foreign to my imagination. Remnants of his existence, a black and white wallet-sized picture, a faded yellow shirt. Mother keeps to the living room, sewing her life into cloth too fearful to confront the world. She has sewn 40 patches of make new friends and keep the old as silver, the new ones gold. Sister inhabits the kitchen, cooking her dreams away, the perfect daughter. Wednesday's menu for dinner, rice, chicken boiled with bitter melon, baby bok with garlic and pork. Brother is nowhere to be found, out roaming the world, he will inherit. He's a man, okay. Friday afternoon, a police officer escorts him home for stealing a Nestle's Crunch Bar at the J.J. Newberry's. And in my room, where thoughts are locked in books and dreams are stored on shelves. I'm still young, I keep telling myself. 2:30 a.m., I'm still writing. Mother hits me on the head with my journal. Can you eat straight A's? She wants to know. So what a lot of people clued into in this poem is that each one of the family members is having a bit of a crisis in relation to the death of the father. And the head of the family being gone, each one is kind of dealing with that in a different way. And they contrast with each other. The way that the brother handles it is kind of acting out. The sister becomes more domestic. The mom is kind of frightened and scared. So we can shed some light on how their different reactions to the death of their father vary and are contrasted, right? And that speaks to their relationship. So there are some contrasts. We could maybe list them, or if I was in a time situation, I might mentally list them, right? Depending, I might not have time to write them all out. I can contrast the dead with the living. I can contrast the mother who's afraid to confront the world with the brother who goes out into the world. The sister is the perfect daughter and the brother is not. The father is in the imagination barely, and the mother is practical. So the father lives in that abstract world and the mother lives in the practical, like physical world. So I could use any one of those contrasts or a different one to start writing about the relationship between these family members. And you can go to that one in your AP classroom and look and see what you wrote. And I gave you some feedback on that. Hopefully you're able to access that. But I have to turn, I thought I had a little question thing. Oh, this one. How do contrasts help us understand the complex relationships? Okay, so I put that at the top of this page right here. If I answer that question, I could have a really good claim. The contrast among the coping methods for each family show how the speaker's family members have dealt with the father's death in different ways. So that's a good answer, and it's also a good claim. If the rest of my paragraph talks about sort of each family member's different way of coping and contrast that, then I've answered the question and supported it. Another thing that people talked about a lot with the poem was gender roles. I think it's because, you know, the mom's there sewing, sister's there cooking. Those are traditional kind of like, you know, old-fashioned woman roles. And the brother is out, you know, doing, you know, things in the streets and so on and so forth. So some people wrote about how there's a contrast in gender roles, which I think also works with the poem. The contrasting gender roles and relations demonstrate the complicated relationships the speaker has with their mother, sister, and brother. Now you notice that I don't just have a claim that says there are complicated relationships and contrasts in this poem. The contrast is being named. In this case, it's the contrast in gender roles. In this one, it's the contrast in the coping methods. And that's what makes those better claims, because they're specific. And now we know that that's what we're writing about in the paragraph, not anything that comes to mind, right? If you leave your claim general, you're leaving yourself open for wandering around in your answer. And a flimsy answer like that can't get the top points. So I just put another reminder about what they're asking you to do on those questions. So I'm hoping that those notes helped you to think about your responses. Also, I gave you individual notes so that you could look at how you wanted to. Somebody's at my door, I don't know why. Hold on a second. Yes?
This from the library.
Okay.
Extra better.
All right, I'm teaching right now online, so that's okay. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry about that. They were delivering some kind of, I don't know what that is. It's a big old thing. Maybe it's Chromebooks? Chrome cart? Looks like a Chrome cart. Anyway, any final questions about this debriefing, anything that doesn't make sense, or I can go into more depth for you about? After lunch, everybody's zoning out in fourth period. All right, well, the last thing that I want to do today then is to go to the discussion. And let me give you the notes for that. Right here under assignment number 1. I set up a Padlet where we're going to do kind of an online discussion, and I have an idea about it. I had this idea this morning. I know this doesn't sound like I'm planning, but I do plan. I just, sometimes I add stuff to my plans. So we've worked with Padlets before. We're going to add, I set one up for us to discuss the first 2 chapters of the Metamorphosis, because there might be some lines in there or some things going on that are a little bit weird or we have questions about. And I want to discuss them. I don't think we have a ton of time left, but I do want to do something extra with them. So let's all go to the Padlet. You can click right here. I mean, it's especially beautiful for the Metamorphosis. Oh, Gregor. I should put a little hat on him or something. So what I want you to do is go back through your notes that you have from chapter 2. You should have made notes specifically about how the conflicts are becoming more complex or more detailed in chapter 2, because we have the rising action part of the story. So look over your notes, maybe open the PDF or the textbook, whatever you have there. And I want you to start adding some questions that you would like us to discuss or for me to talk about to this Padlet. So you can just go down here and you can, on the plus, click and then write a question, right? It could be one of those interpretive questions like we did last time, or it could be a clarifying question. Like, I don't get what they're talking about on page, 205 when they say, quote, whatever. Or what does Gregor mean when he says whatever? And you can put your name on it. Or if you don't want to put your name on it because you're shy about it, then you can go ahead and put in your ID number, because I can look that up. But I feel like in a class we have to trust each other. Okay, 2374. 2. So I want us to spend a little time, and what I want you to do is put a question or look at the questions and see if you can offer an idea that answers it. You should be able to go in and comment underneath any of these questions. And then I'll explain to you how we're going to take it up a notch, or how I'm going to take it up a notch once we have some questions in the field. So take a few minutes to go through your notes and pop some questions on there so that we can talk about them. I do feel like we learn more about the sister and the mom too, really, in chapter 2, right? I feel like y'all just wanted to put those questions so you could cover up that bug. Well, he does cover himself up in chapter 2, right, with that sheet so that they don't have to look at his ugly bug body. Mhm.
Does it say that he's like a giant bug or like a normal size, not a normal size bug, but like a human size bug?
Right. It doesn't really say,
Oh, because I
but
keep picturing him like a giant bug, but then like when I read it, like when he fits under the sofa and stuff, I'm like, oh, I don't think so.
well, but he barely fits under the sofa, right? And it's uncomfortable for him. So He's gonna be pretty big.
Yeah, no, there's no way. He has to be big because they also mentioned moving the furniture so that he has more room to
Yeah,
crawl around.
yeah. And then when he falls from the ceiling, he doesn't like crash into the furniture too. Yeah. I don't know if he's like full human size or not. But most of the time, whenever people imagine the scene, because obviously there's not a photograph of this, but when they imagine the scene, he's just replaced by a human-sized bug. So, you know, I guess you're allowed to imagine it however you want to, but it'd be hard to take the flesh of your human-sized grown-up body and turn it into, you know, that big. Plus, I don't think they'd be as disturbed by it if he was only this big, right? Like part of the
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like he's like not a human sized bug, but he's big, but he's not like giant. And I
yeah.
don't know, like when I read through it, like I keep changing, so I don't know how he looks like.
I do think that he's got to be big though, because he talks about, you know, not fitting places and, you know, that sort of thing. And the way he has to turn around in the hallway, you know, kind of makes it hard to think that he's
He's
tiny.
wider than the door frame.
Yeah, yeah. Well, plus he's got that bug beetle back on him, right? Like, so he's more rounded in the back than he was as a human, and he's got to turn and kind of like wedge himself in. So yeah, he's usually pretty good. There are some really interesting pictures in this book. Is in this book that they have the pictures of that one play where he's got all kinds of junk on him? Yeah. Okay, so they have a picture on page 201 from chapter 1. I don't know if this book has a later picture from that same play. So as time goes by, because time passes, like several months go by, they don't have it in this book. I should find it and put it as one of the formatives. He gets like more bug-like. While you guys are working, I'll go find that picture because like he's a human and he's hanging on the wall. Where is that image? Okay, there's that guy. He's kind of like smeared with stuff. Oh, here it is. There it is. Can you see it? Like he's literally transforming his body into like a disfigured thing. It's not supposed to be pleasant. What?
I was just gonna say that's so gross.
I know, right? Imagine going on a date to the play or something and you get there and it's that. Okay.
No.
But he sort of like gradually turns into that, right? Like he starts off with a suit and he says that he's a bug and he's hanging on the wall. There's a picture of that back in chapter 1. I think it's the same play. It's just maybe they didn't have permission to put that picture. Maybe it was too much. I don't know. I don't think it's too much. It's on page 201, where he's there on the wall, and yeah. So then he transforms. Like his metamorphosis isn't complete when he just wakes up as a bug. So then the question is, what is he turning into, right? Go and try to put some answers in there. Look at some of them and see if you want to put some answers, because here's what I'm going to do. We're running out of time for class today. So any that don't have answers on them, I'm going to make a little video where I talk a little bit about that, and I'm going to post them on these questions. So at least you can hear me talking a little bit about some ideas on each one of those things that you're wondering about. And then you can go back and like view them. Because when you're making, I'll just use this one for example. when you're making a one of these little Padlet posts, you can go to the three dot, like obviously you can put in a link or you can do a Google search or you can put a picture, but you can also add all these things over here. So I can just record myself giving a little answer. I'm thinking that's kind of cool because you can then go back and see, you know, like different ideas about answers to the questions. But spend a little bit of time answering a couple of questions. You can put your name next to your answers. And then that's pretty much it for today. But it's just sort of like my way of checking on your homework for this week. Oh, Padlet updated elsewhere. Okay.
But you want us to answer the questions here, right?
Yeah, if you
Okay.
can, like look at a couple questions and see if you have some ideas about them. If we were in class, I'd probably put you in some groups and have you discussing them. But I'm not a big fan of writing questions myself and having you answer them. I want you to ask your own questions and answer them. It's a different skill. A lot of questions about Gregor's sister, Greta. I don't see too many people doing responses. Can you add a comment? Is it preventing you from doing that?
Miss,
I added one.
it's like not coming out. So I think
Typed one, but it's not coming out?
like on your
Oh,
screen.
here it
Like
is.
I'm looking at yours right now.
Here it is.
Okay.
It's just delayed. I think it's just delayed. Yeah. Did anybody go around thinking about what it would really be like in your family if you woke up tomorrow and were a bug? Like, which one of your family members would be like Greta, coming in and trying to give you food that you liked and cleaning up and looking after you? Which one would be like Gregor's father who just swats at him? And I mean, that can't happen, right? Like, you can't wake up and be a human-sized bug the next day, right? No matter how bad your dreams were or how late you stayed up working on your homework. Sometimes I would wake up in the morning thinking that I feel like a bug. All right, so once you've either answered one of these questions or you posed a question and you feel like, you know, you've worked with the ideas in chapter 2 a little bit, then that's pretty much it for today. I will send you a message on Google Classroom when I've gone ahead and made a few video notes about some of these questions, because this week you need to read the final chapter, chapter 3. And then that way you can go back and kind of watch some of the commentary. People are putting in ideas, so that's good. But anything that's outstanding, I'll go ahead and make a little response for it. It's more fun to watch a video, isn't it, than it is to read my 17 comments. Probably right. I was thinking this would be a good way to do, like, what if you did a Padlet on terminology, right? Like all the poetic terminology. And there's a little video of me explaining each term all on one page. That'd be cool, right? Or I was trying to tell Mr. Ramos about it, and I said, you could just put all of your like rhetorical terms on one Padlet with a little explanation, anyone that they needed it, like a glossary or a dictionary, right? You could go back and just click on, you know, ethos, And then up pops Mr. Ramos explaining ethos to you. Wouldn't that be cool? I was trying to explain that to him, but he's not as techie as I am. Those of you who know him. Yeah, I like that there's a lot of questions about Gregor's sister because she becomes a lot more involved. She's pretty much gone through all of chapter 1, just a few references to her, but then chapter 2, she comes to the forefront. All right, once you've posted, that's pretty much it for today. You can come back later and check out any comments that I put or videos that I added to these questions. I think that if you look at those before you start reading chapter 3, by the way, this is not going to be a happy ending. In case you can't tell, it's not going to be a happy ending. Don't get surprised if something happens to Gregor. I'm not going to tell you what happens, but it's good to have an understanding of chapter 2 before you move into chapter 3, okay? Any outstanding questions on this week's assignments while there's still some of those things coming in? Each assignment down here has a separate thing. Not everything has something for you to turn in though. Sometimes it's just about checking it off. All right. Well, you're free to go if you've made your comment there. And I will see you on next Monday. All right.
Bye, Miss.
Bye. Have a good week.
Oh, good week too. Today's Monday, I forgot.
Yeah. Have a good week. Good work today.